Hello and welcome back to Kim Reads' Continuous Son of a Witch. The Balisca was more or less functional by Liir. True, the pagan cult of Lorraine, the sprite said by some to have founded Oz, was out of favor. Few but illiterate country folk paid obeisance to Lorraine anymore. But the celebration of that old holiday was still popular. Lorraineism had been quietly absorbed into the common culture, not least because cash tills splashed with money during the festive season. Lurleen West made a welcome distraction from the anxiety about leadership that seemed to still grip Oz, even though the wizard was now gone half a year. Holiday presents came in all sides for everyone but Liir. He had prepared a story about his parents' fierce devotion to unionism and their rejection of the heathen custom, but he didn't need to lie. No one asked about the absence of gifts by his bunk. His mates received parcels in gilt paper, silly trinkets, useful clothes, small wallets of cash scented with clothes. He remembered the time Nora had given him the tale of his gingerbread mouse. His mouth watered, but he swallowed it down. The Balisca was large enough to hold nearly 1,000 at a time, so everyone got to attend the strictly unionist service on Loremus. Liir saw Commander Cherrystone in the front. A visiting chaplain with an engaged lip pulled himself into the pulpit and intoned the beginning of a homily. The sung petition Peter on a tirade against the loose morals of the decay. Most of the soldiers went instantly to sleep, propping up one another on the benches. But Liir still made so little exposure to homiletics that he straight up and listened. The preacher, perhaps sensing that someone midway down the room on the left was actually paying attention, began to improve. The minister gripped the edges of the lectern and swayed sideways. At every stage, even in the decorous and seemly that the army provides, you hear weird rumors of magical uprising spring up, like weevils in the wheat, like maggots in the rump roast. Either his raised voice or the mention of magic stirred the morning crowd awake. In warning to challenge the blasphemous acrophilia, the minister repeated some stories being told and retold about town. Magic appeal is sure faithism. The pleasure faith that attracts by the glitter of the surface. He rattled. Change a fish into a farthingale or feather duster, all distraction, all sleight of the skin, but change a fish into a fish fillet and feed your hungry mother now. That's a magic we can applaud. The magic of human charity. Liir was ready to applaud. Who wouldn't? But no one else stirred. So he settled his hands back to his lap. Urban legends, they spring up when the times are grim, continued the homiliest. That Ozma will return to govern the humble. The little toast roundlets spread with herb edge goat cheese fall in the desert and feed the starving. The horned hogs, in sacrifice themselves, will confer a magical community to residents of South Stairs and help them to survive their confinement. Liir nearly jumped out of his seat. Oh no, continue the minister. The Ozma kidnapped years ago is dead in an unmarked grave, and her bones are halfway to dust. Toast roundlets don't fall in the desert unless you're in the final delirium of starvation, and they don't take so much even then. Horned hogs, when they die in South Stairs, are carted to Pauper's Field, and their corpses burned. Nothing in front of them remains, not a jot of magical comfort for any the denizens of South Stairs. Better, the prisoners should turn to their wretched hearts to the unnamed God and beg forgiveness for even imagining such a fair go of faith. Pauper's Field, then Liir committed it to memory, but he listened to the minister's addresses to the end in case there was more to learn. The words rolled on sonorously and as bowing in their way as the winds had been one night that Liir had ventured on the broomstick. At the close of the service, Liir bravely pushed forward and touched the minister on the sleeve. The man, older than he'd heard from below, turned wealthy to look at Liir. They exchanged a few words. Liir asked for instructionism and unionism. He'd be moved by the remarks. He wondered aloud if escaping Kiamako the way he did, even at the cost of Elphaba's death, had been the unnamed god's way of getting Lear's attention. Minner said it too sharply. Why? Have you seen or do you know of magic being done here? Here? On the present premises, perhaps? Are you being tempted by the wrong forces? Explain, boy. Liir was alarmed and shrank back. Foolish to have identified himself so. Shaking his head, he excused himself from the conversation and laughed. It was too cold to venture out of the guard yard, but the weeks would pass and the sun would wheel. On the worst of the season had slunk by, he would think of an excuse to scowl at the pauper's field, learned what he could. The day did time, though not soonly enough, and Liir made the trip swiftly and only a little illegally. Initially, he had been inventing an ailing mother and a crippled father. After being the home guard for 6 months, he was given leave to carry them a few coins and half a loaf of bread. Apparently, those invention of story and magic horned hogs had worked too well. The legend had spread through the urban population like news of a scandal, and pilgrims had begun to mass at the pyre of the horned hogs. The crematorium at Pauper's Field had been abandoned and demolished. The squatters, whose tents had sprung up on the dreadful spot, knew little of what was going on here. Nothing of the horned hogs or an escaped convict himself scarce had been discovered. Still returned to the base, Liir found himself less than distraught. If Nor really had been the invention and courage, even after all those years, to secret himself out of South Stair sandwiched between two slaughtered hogs, she'd have somehow managed to find a warm place for the winter. The reunion was somewhere waiting for them. He would have faith in the unnamed God, who even now was probably ordaining the right time and place in some secret holy plan. All Liir had to do was bide his time, do his work, peel his potatoes, keep his nose clean and his eyes open. And the UG, as Lear's barracks mates termed it, would tell him what to do next and when he did it. As to his hopes for helping Princess Nastoya, it wasn't going to happen. You didn't learn magic in the army. You had nothing to say to her, no way to give comfort. Probably she was dead already anyway. There were some new habits to examine in the privacy of his bunk. Self-amusement was the least of it. Operating so low beneath the rough sheets was risky business in a dormitory setting, and his mates were always alert to the cues. One of their number was finding himself hot and bothered, and nothing to be done about it. No, his secret distractions were acts of memory, flights of doubt, even at times a feeble attempt at prayer. He wondered why the chaplain spent so much time discoursing on the value of prayer to the enlisted man, yet never gave instruction on how prayer ought to be conducted. Even the fun given by a dozen young men dozing in nearby bunks, Liir itemized his attributes and considered they were being heightened and straightened by life in the barracks. Rectitude, for one, propriety, custody of the sentence. That was how he mostly resisted masturbation. Also, Liir found he was developing a capacity for respect. Marked of a soldier, of course, back at Kiamako. He hadn't been respectful, he'd been ignorant and scared. There was a difference. The army thrived on regulae, precision, obedience, and righteous of thinking. Had Elphaba possessed any of those virtues, when she'd been sloppy with emotion, vivid with rage and grief, which was most of the time, she had been able to keep to a schedule. Coffee at midnight, waking up others by slamming the larder door looking for cream. Lunch at sunset, breadcrumbs on the harpsclaver keys, pelting through the gates of the castle in any weather at any hour, no matter if Liir had just laid out a couple of coddled eggs for her. Studying the night through, getting excited, reading from the heat, a book of hers out loud, to hear how they went, to hear how they sounded. Waking Chistriana's perch at the top of the wardrobe, impetuous and selfish, totally selfish. How had he not seen it? And I'm gonna stop there. Thanks for listening.